Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Hi, this is Wayne Green. I'm the VP of Marketing at RigD, and I'm welcoming you to our webinar, which will be covering our PagerDuty Slack integration, titled Use Superpowers to Breeze Through PagerDuty Incident Management in Slack. Presenting and demoing today will be Justin Griffin, our CEO, and I will turn it over to Justin. I'll just ask you if you have any questions, please use the chat screen. I'm going to mute everyone. Looks like everyone is muted, and if we can answer the questions online during, we will, or we'll open it up at the end for questions as well. But please use the chat screen to put your questions in there. All right, Justin.
All right, thank you, Wayne, and thank you all for taking some time to join us today. I truly hope you'll find this interesting. While at the end of the day, these support teams might not always seem like superheroes, the reality is when they get the job done and make the customers happy, they truly are superheroes. And so we're going to talk about how RigD helps solve a few of the common issues that are involved in the process of managing incidents. Some incidents might be rather minor, internal identified ones. Other ones could be the type that are costing you thousands of dollars per minute to get resolved. So a couple of the primary things that we focus on trying to attack with the RigD integration with PagerDuty. First and foremost is just cutting out the waste that's involved with the time it takes to identify incidents, figure out who needs to be involved in resolving that incident or working on that incident, and then getting started with working on it. That's kind of the really painful amount of time that you spend with incidents, is that time that you're not really doing anything except trying to get people together and get organized. The next phase that we try to help improve is the time you're spending troubleshooting the incident and ultimately remediating it. This is usually the time where you're very actively involved as a team, and the most important work is going on. If you can speed that time up and get to the resolution quicker, people are back up and running faster. What we also try to do in the latter part of that is ultimately look at how you are learning from your past incidents and help you in that regards. Most teams find themselves in a situation where they figure out how to resolve a significant issue, and they're very happy to have done that. But the opportunity to really learn from that experience and ensure that the resolution time is faster for the next incident is usually missed, whether there isn't data collected or there just frankly isn't the time to invest in that sort of learning. And ultimately all three of these challenge areas really typically result in increased time to resolution, which translates usually to direct revenue lost or costs for the company. Not to mention, of course, the frustration for customers as well as internal constituents. So, we just talked a little bit about some of the challenges. I'll just kind of highlight a little bit high level how we are trying to resolve those, and then we'll sort of dig into the workflow with RigD. But when it comes to assessing issues, RigD can help really quickly by allowing you inside of Slack to resolve issues to identify issues, determine who needs to resolve them, and get them assigned to those right people. And that's a very simple aspect of solving issues, but one where any time spent during that is really wasted time at resolving the issue. So by doing that faster, we really help you cut out waste in that process. Once you get into the phase of responding to an incident, we've got some really innovative capabilities there that help you work an incident collaboratively with your team, and really help speed up some of the troubleshooting and remediation tasks that are involved with that incident. And finally, on the learning side, most teams aspire to have a good post-mortem process. One of the things that we can do to really help that is provide you a nice digest of what went on while working on an incident, and then ultimately using that information through machine learning to drive more automation into the process. So let's take a little bit a little more in-depth look at that process and how we help improve that through machine learning and automation. So if you think of your typical process flow here, you start with a business service. That's your software or services that you're providing. You typically have that connected to a monitoring system. It could be metric monitoring, it could be a log monitoring, or maybe security monitoring system. And those eventually feed an alert into PagerDuty and thus trigger the incident showing up in PagerDuty. So that's a pretty standard front end of the incident management workflow. At that point, that's kind of when the human aspect of the process kicks in. You go from manual, or automated systems reading data, inferring whether there's an issue, and then feeding that issue to a human to then do some, more detailed assessment on what type of issue is it, who's the best person to engage with to get this resolved if it's not me, and sort of what might be the path to triage and resolve that issue. After you've you sort of assessed the issue and you're ready to start working on it, you kind of move into the respond phase. This typically involves three sort of activities. First is the coordination, right? Making sure the team is updated on progress and status of an incident. The second part of it is that typical troubleshooting. Have I gathered the information from the right sources? Do I have the right people interacting and evaluating that information to assess and to ultimately determine what the issue might be? And then ideally you drive towards a resolution in that phase for the issue as quickly as possible. And that might be a configuration change, a code change, or sometimes it's just a simple matter of restarting a service, right? Whatever it may be, there was a resolution that occurs. And then that final phase in the workflow is really that learning process. So looking at the data and deciding what could we have done better the next time we have an incident. Maybe it's in general, maybe it's for this specific type of incident because you have sort of a repeat type patterns. So that's kind of your standard process. Where we sort of jump in on that is throughout the assess and respond phase, we enable functionality inside of Slack that allows us to learn from the human interactions that are going on. It might be chatting with another colleague about what they think the issue might be and learning from those discussions, what are important things to save for and be cognizant of for future incidents. It might actually be actions such as gathering logs from a log system or checking a dashboard of that nature. Those type of interactions are things that we can capture and be aware of, and then through machine learning, we can identify patterns and then ultimately help drive automation into the process the next time around by suggesting things that you might want to do the next time an issue comes in. So ultimately, that process and our engagement with machine learning in there helps you to accelerate the troubleshooting and remediation by driving automation at certain points into that process. Now, the net benefit is for your typical enterprise that's spending, $6,000 or more, or losing $6,000 or more dollars per minute of downtime, we can help you drive down the resolution times by as much as 70%, and ultimately that it translates to thousands of dollars worth of savings through the use of RigD and in conjunction with PagerDuty and Slack. So now we're going to take a quick look at three very specific type of challenges that we've seen through our customers and users, and just try to talk through how we can and show you how we can actually help in those cases. The first thing that we typically see is people who have tried to feed notifications into Slack usually end up suffering from sort of the information overload scenario. Same thing was happening with people back in, with email, and you start creating email folders and having rules to route stuff into direct folders, and then you tend to ignore those. Well, the same thing is happening in Slack, where we see teams are setting up a notification channel and then muting that channel. great. You don't have the annoyance of all those notifications, but it ultimately leads to a slower, identification process, and worse yet, you may even miss some incidents that you're responsible for. The other aspect of that where we see a lot of pain is the switching back and forth between Slack and PagerDuty to figure out who's on call or get a little more information about an incident. And with RigD, we're going to be able to help you save, again, around 70% of the time it would typically take you to do some of these basic PagerDuty interactions. And so you can ultimately get to the troubleshooting and resolution phase of your incident management process sooner. And as a consequence, you'll ultimately avoid some of the context switching, which can be rather tedious. So now let's go ahead and take a look at a particular incident here. So I'm going to switch over to Slack. And right now, there are two modes in which you can get incidents inside of Slack using RigD. So I've got an incident feed set up here. So I've got a service here in PagerDuty that's feeding incidents into RigD. And right now I'm looking at a direct message channel with our RigD bot here. And you'll notice I have a feed of several incidents. These are all incidents that are assigned to me and are relevant to me. And that's why I'm getting them in this direct channel. So in this particular case, I've got this one here, a slow database response that was escalated to me. It's not really an area I cover, so I'm going to go ahead and escalate that. But first, I'm going to figure out who I need to escalate it to. So I'm going to do get PD teams, and I'm going to get a list of my teams that I have on my in my PagerDuty system here. And I happen to know the database really ought to be going to the platform team, so I'm going to just simply choose who's on call for the platform team. And we're going to see that, oh, Mike's on call. So I'm going to go back to my incident here. I've got a handy little drop down of some common activities you would do around a PagerDuty incident. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and reassign this to Mike. So I'm going to choose assign. And then this is where we have a nice integration with Slack. I don't need to type his email address. If he's in Slack, I can just choose @Mike and use the standard Slack, behaviors to link users between PagerDuty and Slack. So there I've just gone ahead and quickly assigned an incident, figured out who's on call, and that took, less than a minute to go ahead and follow that process. So it's very efficient and easy to get those things done. If I were to jump over here, you'll notice there's also a channel where we have set up a feed. This is kind of your standard notification channel, so you see lots of activity here. I just reassigned this one to Mike, so you see this same incident has been reassigned. So that's both a feed mechanism through a notification channel, as well as direct notifications, which are only sent to you for incidents that are relevant for you. Now let's take a look at sort of the second phase. Before we do that, I'm going to jump back and kind of set up the sort of the challenges that we're addressing here. So once you've identified an issue you want to work on, you end up in that sort of corral the rest of the team, get them engaged, and start working on the incident. The most common areas that we see as really painful here are getting the right people into the place that you want to discuss and work on an issue. Now, obviously, our assumption is that and what we've seen is that's more and more becoming a Slack channel, whereas in the old days it might have been a conference bridge. So we see teams that have lists of users they need to contact in a wiki page, and they're literally direct emailing them or notifying them, trying to get them onto the right place. And then obviously the follow-ups of, hey, have I added a note to an incident so people know what's going on, so I'm not being distracted by those, hey, can you let us know what the status is? These type of things really sort of slow down the troubleshooting process. And then, of course, for the troubleshooting process, the more you can do in sort of a single interface and avoid, having everyone have to jump out to multiple tools to gather and assess, and evaluate information, the faster we can do. And so these are some of the things that we're going to be able to help you with RigD. Getting responders set up in the channel where you're going to work the incident in a matter of seconds. Adding notes directly inside of Slack, so you don't have to jump back to PagerDuty to do that, and you can do it really quickly and easily and keep everyone informed. And then, of course, I'll show you some of the things that we can do around the data collection inside of Slack to speed things up. So let's switch back to Slack and take a look at a particular incident. I'll go ahead and go to our feed channel here, and we'll take this one here. We've got an error seen in Lambda logs. So again, from the drop-down here of menu choices, I'm going to go choose a specific one called work. And work and incident is really when you start bringing people together and you start engaging on solving an incident. And this is a unique functionality for RigD. It's not a specific PagerDuty action. So I'm going to add some responders and other people to this incident. I could, of course, add them through PagerDuty as responders. You can also, in this particular context, just go ahead and add them from Slack. Now, we do provide suggestions for common values for inputs. So in this case, instead of typing @ops, I could choose one, and that's automatically going to insert the ops team or group, user group in Slack into this working channel and to work on this particular incident. I'm going to choose no, or I don't want this to be a private channel. I want other people to be able to join. And that's going to go ahead and create a dedicated channel in Slack. You get a handy link to that. And inside that channel, it's going to, for convenience, dump the information for the PagerDuty incident right into the channel. You notice it's also going to pin it on the right-hand side, which makes it easy to reference that information for people joining later on. The next thing I'm going to do is we're going to start our typical triage process. And for this, I'm going to demonstrate what we call a flow, which is a brief automation, sort of the automation capabilities that we have in RigD. So I have a flow that I've created called triage. So we're going to run through that, and it's going to basically execute a triage process that we have for our particular instance. First thing it's going to do is say, okay, we should check our Datadog dashboard to see if there's any failures. Provides a URL which links out to that Datadog dashboard. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through the whole Datadog dashboard. We'll jump back into Slack and move on to the second part of our triage, which is, do you have a Jira Service Desk ticket? Often we see customers using some other system of record besides PagerDuty for sort of keeping track of incidents over time. It might be helpful that way it links up to customer service information and that sort of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and choose yes. There's already a service desk ticket, and just move on in the flow. Next thing you might want to do is a lot of people we have as customers tend to use status page to reflect the current status of a product or service to the outside public. So in this case, I'm going to say yes, I do want to update my status page. And now it's going to kick off an activity to actually update the status. So I'm just going to use these suggestions here, which are for our RigD status page and RigD app. And then I'm going to choose basically what type of status I want to use. Now, one thing I'll note is this particular activity is what we call a custom activity. We created it specifically for an individual customer, and we use it in demos. With RigD, you can create your own special activities if the RigD system doesn't have one that you're interested in because it's relevant for your flow. One of the other things we also did as a custom activity was some people still would like to use sort of a live chat or voice meeting rooms. So we have an integration that we set up for someone to create a Zoom meeting. So in this case, I'm just going to choose nope and move on. The RigD interface is natural language based, so you have a fair amount of flexibility in terms of how you respond and interact with it. It could be things like yes and no, Y and N, nope, I don't think so, or I don't want to do that. There's a lot of flexibility here. Now we can see some of the rest of that triage workflow is it's providing some information on who's for this particular service, who is in the escalation path, and just a reminder to go ahead and update your status. So now that I've got some an incident here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get the details of the alert, and I can do that directly from the incident details that were provided above, and those will feed out into the console. So I can see these are the details coming from Sumo Logic as an underlying system feeding PagerDuty. And so I've got an AWS log file here, and I've also got the actual log message. So I'm going to ask John if it seems like maybe there's a memory issue based on the exception that we're seeing here. Let's see what he thinks. Now, in many cases, you also see these links here. If there is a link out to the underlying tool, we often provide that so that if there's something else that we're not showing on the screen, you can get that extra information. Okay, John, you think we ought to grab the logs, so let's do get cloud. Let's get the CloudWatch logs for this particular incident. And yeah, this is for Hello World, so. And I copied the message here, so we'll go ahead and just paste that in for the name of the log stream. And do I want the full log file or just the most recent? We'll just grab the most recent entries, as that's probably when the error was from, since it just came in. And in a few seconds, I've got the logs file populated here in Slack. I can take a look at some more details. And if I needed to share it with anyone else, you can, of course, use your sort of standard Slack capabilities to share the message with other people. Looks like Wayne's looking for an update on the issue. So let's go ahead and add a note to PagerDuty. Sure, Wayne. And we'll go ahead and just type add PD note, and the incident that we're working here is 27292, so we'll just choose that from one of our suggestions. The suggestions will always give you sort of the most recent item you're working with, as well as the one that you most frequently work with. That's why you see sort of two options there in case you're switching context and you want to stick with your most commonly used item. So I'm taking a look at this with John. We'll just use that as our note for this particular item. Okay, so great. Now Wayne and everyone else who's watching that particular issue have been notified. Oh, it says, looks like John's pretty confident we're short on memory. Okay, thanks, John. And so we can also see if we jump back into our feed channel, we've got the notification of that particular note. So people who are monitoring the feed channel will see that. And again, you'll also get direct notifications when someone makes an update. So now let's take a look at the third section that we have, sort of an area that we've attempted to address here with RigD capabilities, the post-mortem and the continuous learning process. So we just went through a troubleshooting session, and there was a fair amount of data that was gathered in that particular session. Next, we might want to look at, okay, how can we use that information to improve and add value in the future? The first thing we do is we generate a digest out of those incidents, which helps you have sort of a clean record of what went on during each troubleshooting session that you worked an incident for. So you have the ability to look back through those in a manual fashion. You can obviously use those if you need to provide sort of an action, after action report to management. It's also important because it's what we use internally to help drive the machine learning and the automation in the future, right? So if we notice things are being done repetitively, we can help you build automation for those tasks in the future. It might be a workflow like that triage workflow I went through, or it might be more of maybe a resolution type workflow where you're updating the actual config and pushing a change and that sort of thing. So let's sort of take a look at that in Slack and see what that looks like here. So I'm going to go ahead and we've got 27292. That's the one we just worked on. Looks like John finished his changes. We'll choose Get Digest for that particular issue. Now, obviously, you only have a digest for issues that you've worked through RigD. So the digest is something that's unique for RigD sessions. It's going to take a few seconds to run because it's going to calculate some statistics, and it's also going to generate a fair amount of activity log. So let's first take a quick look at the top section here. So you'll get some basic information on your incident, which service it was for, and how long it took to acknowledge, how much time you spent troubleshooting. So, the time to acknowledgement's kind of that dead time where you weren't, nothing was happening. Troubleshooting time is that ultimately that time you were actively working on it. And then, of course, your resolution time is ultimately the time from it was first identified to the time it was resolved. The next thing we show you is kind of activity level. So there were 4 active team members engaged in this troubleshooting session. There were 17 total messages across those active members. And then there were 7 specific RigD activities that were run during that session. Next thing we do is kind of give you the details of that particular activity. So you'll see here we've got those statements that were part of our triage flow, and then the responses to those. You'll notice they're coded there as a question and answer. So we do the same sort of natural language processing we do on your inputs. We also do for these things, so you can get a fairly detailed understanding of, are people asking questions in troubleshooting sessions? What are the most common questions? That allows us to, again, look at automating those particular question sessions, engagements. And then for activities, it lets you know what activity was run and what sort of inputs were provided to that. So it's really helpful if you have a common issue, so you could go back and look at a digest and have a pretty detailed view of what went on and how you might be able to sort of replicate the troubleshooting and resolution process. And if you scroll down, we'll see John actually went ahead and resolved this through a direct update to a Lambda config inside of Slack and changed the memory size here. The last thing I'll note on this is, as I said, obviously our objective is to drive towards automation. So the same way we used that triage flow earlier, you can generate your own flows off of perhaps a really good working session. So if you've followed a pretty good process, you can generate a flow right off of that session, and then of course edit it to modify it if you need to tweak a few things. You can also build a flow from the ground up if you already know kind of what your standard triage process is. So those are sort of 3 common issues that we've seen through our engagement with customers and users, and how we can help solve those in a little more efficient manner than using RigD or not using RigD. So one thing I'll mention is RigD is partnered up with PagerDuty. We now actually offer our RigD Basic Edition for PagerDuty for free. So you're all more than welcome to give it a try and use it for your PagerDuty incident management for up to 3 services for free. So all the things we just went through are pretty much available for you to access. If you'd like to learn more information, you can, of course, go to our website, www.rigd.io. We tend to post things from time to time on LinkedIn and Twitter, and we also do a fair amount of how-to videos, which you can access through our YouTube channel. Installing the app is actually incredibly easy. I'll show you really quickly how you can just do that directly from Slack. So I've got a sort of an empty workspace here I created. You just simply choose the apps button on the left-hand side and then search for RigD and go ahead and choose install. It will bring you to the Slack app directory page. You just choose the install button. It's going to indicate which sort of roles or access we're going to use. Choose authorize. And then in a few seconds after that, you'll be off to the races inside of Slack. And you get a welcome message here that'll help you sort of walk through how to get your PagerDuty access configured. So last thing I'll mention is, and I think this is one of the most useful things that we've seen for our new customers, you can get real-time support inside of Slack through RigD for RigD, right? So if you have a question, simply type tell RigD inside of obviously a channel or direct message with RigD, and you can just ask a question and you'll get the team here, the crew will get notified, and we'll get back to you right away with an answer to your question or engage with you as much as necessary. That really helps speed up the time it takes for you to get going. And obviously, if RigD is trying to help you save time on the incident management, if you have an issue with RigD, you want to get it solved so you can get back to managing incidents. So that's all we have for today. Any questions we have, Wayne, that I can answer verbally at this point?
Yeah, thanks, Justin. So if anybody has a question, if you want to go off mute, you can ask it. If you want to just type it in, we can respond to it as well. I just want to remind you, you'll get copies of the slides and the recording as well, and some emails you'll get from me. Is there any questions? We'll pause.
This is Ramana. Okay. Is it mandated that we need to have PagerDuty for this, or is it can it be worked standalone as well without PagerDuty?
Yeah. So today it's a PagerDuty is the incident management platform that we support. I certainly on our roadmap we have a couple others that we're looking at, as well as sort of more of a general purpose capabilities, specifically around like working an issue as a general construct versus a specific PagerDuty incident. So these are things that are on our roadmap, but today it's sort of unique to, or it's been specifically tailored and developed for PagerDuty as the incident management platform.
Now, that being said, you did see the flow function. So you can obviously use, for example, PagerDuty and just use it as kind of a structure for your support team. It can enter a channel. You could have a triage flow. You won't see all the integrations with PagerDuty, but if you wanted to build your own custom activities, for example, we have a company we're talking to that don't plan to use PagerDuty, but they see this very valuable for collecting logs and data and working with the team in a Slack channel with some automation around that flow, and also to get those digests out. So you can use it kind of without PagerDuty, and use it to help your team get more structured and be able to see what they're doing and learn from that.
Let's say that I do have another IT management suite. Do you guys provide APIs to integrate with this RigD? API
so certain aspects of the product are sort of system developed. You can build custom activities so that you can use RigD to do pretty much anything with any tool, so long as the underlying tool has an API that you can access.
Okay.
So it is possible.
Like, for example, one of those activities that one of the folks on our team built was launch a Zoom meeting, right? You wouldn't think of that as a natural activity. But, for example, let's say you wanted to reach out and do, hit another SaaS service somewhere to collect data, or, hit something in your DMZ that gives you access to your on-prem data. You can create those activities yourself within RigD. And we, have people use the tool in that manner in some cases.
Okay. And also I have one more question. Okay, I've seen some processes which was demoed here, but I have not seen much info on how you guys are creating the workflow, like collecting the logs, doing the MIAL stuff. Okay, is there any material on that part which we can review it, go through it?
Yeah, so there's a little bit more on our resources page from our website around that. I'd be happy to have a follow-up and give you a little bit more in depth on that. Obviously, this session was a little bit more focused on specifically some of the PagerDuty, sort of basic use cases. But if you're interested, I'd be happy to follow up with a little more detail on how we use the machine learning to address some of those, to build the automation and how you develop automation flows with RigD.
Thank you.
Great. Anyone else before we wrap up for the day?
I have one question. This is what I say. Thanks for the informative session on this RigD. One question I have is that you talked about incident management. Is there a place where we can see, through this app or any other means, what are all the incidents going on? Because, this is one-on-one incident, but then you also have a higher level view.
Yeah, we should point out that, we didn't really show, but maybe even show the number of commands in PagerDuty, for example. We only showed a few here.
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways you can get to a list of incidents. So one of them is we have a command called list PagerDuty services. We find a lot of people, if you don't know the exact name of your service, it can be frustrating. So this one just kind of gives you a list. there's a button to look at the services that are open for that particular, incidents that are open for that service. So I could choose view open incidents. There's some filter options. So one of the things that we do on a filtration perspective is, do you want triggered or acknowledged? I.e., if somebody's already sort of working on or acknowledged an issue, do you want to just ignore those ones? You can of course skip over that, and then the other filter, criteria is kind of your urgency. Is this a high or low urgency? Again, I'll skip over that. This will give you that list. So if you didn't want to necessarily consume incidents through sort of a feed concept, you can do this at any point in time and get the open issues for a particular service. One of the other things we do, obviously, is that you're color-coded. So, if you see red next to an incident, that means it's still open. If you see green, it means it's resolved. So that's kind of how you can, sort of more proactively get a list of incidents that are open. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and the information that you are displaying over here, that is coming from the PagerDuty, right?
Yes. So all the information we're gathering is gathered in real time from PagerDuty. So there's no concern about, accuracy of the data as far as, is it stale? Has something changed on the PagerDuty side? We gather the data in real time.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Do you want to just show all the PagerDuty commands? Can we just,
yeah. So there's a pretty big list. Fair warning, the help is something we're working on actively right now to sort of improve the readability. When we only had a few commands, it wasn't too bad, but now it's as you can see, it's quite a chart. But you can always get a list through that process. And one of the things we've also done is we've really improved the sort of hybridity of the UI, right? So where you can always type things out manually, get PagerDuty Incident Digest or get PD Digest. In places where we think it's natural, we've added buttons so you can, sort of directly inside of the Slack UI, just click a button to do the same thing.
Kind of like the obvious next step once you've looked at that data, yeah.
Yeah, so that's something, ideally for convenience, if there's something, natural, we'll have a button. Or as you saw in certain case up here, we have these menus which give you pretty much all of the things you might want to do related to an incident.
Thank you. All right, any other questions? Okay, with that, I want to thank you for your time. We'll send you these resources out, and if you'd like a follow-up discussion, more detail about your specific needs, please respond to me. And as well, give the app a try. That's the best way. It's a very quick install, and you can start playing with it.
Yeah, so I think it's about 5 to 10 minutes maximum to get going with RigD. So really encourage you to give it a try. I'd love to hear your feedback and see other ways, hear about other ways we can help you speed up your process and make it easier.
Great. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.